In this tutorial, I'm going to be going over the web server for the versadac, which is a blind data acquisition unit. The web server serves as a basic visual interface to the device. Before we have talked about iTools, which is in front of you right now. iTools is your configuration tool, but the web server provides that interface through the web, meaning it's agnostic to the operating system, so you can view this on your phone, tablet, etc. And it gives you the ability to view data about your process, um, various bar graphs, trends, numeric data. Gives you also gives you the option to do batch control if fitted with batch, demand archiving, and a lot more. So for a basic web server, it's a really neat tool. And today we're going to talk about setting that up in iTools so that it's enabled and you have access to it, as well as going over some of the features of the web server. So as I mentioned before, if you've seen my other video, we talked about how to get the versadac communicating with your computer in iTools so that you can use iTools to configure it. Going down the left-hand side of the screen here, these are your various settings that you can configure. They can be expanded by hitting on the Parameter Explorer window. Then going across the top here, you've got graphical wiring. So if you want to use function block programming to create a specific application, you can. You also have your batch configuration, which we'll get into a little bit more detail here shortly, as well as the security aspect. So being able to create specific usernames, um, for various functionality within your versadac, whether it's access to the web server or being able to make configuration changes, whatever it may be. In order for you to make changes, you'll notice that the font for most of these fields are indicated as blue. Blue is a read-only value. If it's black, it can be read and write. But most everything's going to be blue just because of the fact that we're not logged into the device. So typically with most of our other products, you only have an access icon. But with the versadac, and its functionality with 21 CFR compliance, we also have a login. So it basically adds another level of security. To log into the device, the default settings are engineer and the default password of 100. That gets you logged into the device, okay? Once you're logged into the device, then you need to put into access mode. When you put it into access mode, this basically has the device go into an idle state. So when we click on it, you'll see a message pop up saying that it's not going to control, which is fine. But keep in mind that if you have a process going, the versadac itself will not be doing any functionality. It won't be recording. It also will not be doing any kind of output or any kind of alarming whatsoever. So go ahead and hit yes. Now you notice that once we do that, the fonts have changed from blue to black, indicating that they can be changed. Now I've already gone through the versadac configuration and made some minor configuration changes for this particular demo, with the exception of things like the web server and security. So we'll still hit those parameters. But keep in mind there's a lot of capability to this device, and I'm sure we'll have more videos going forward on how some of these various parameters work. Now, the first thing that I would suggest doing is once you have your versadac up and running and you're logged in, you probably want to go down to where it says web server. Um, if we go down and you click on web server, you notice the first thing that it says is that web server is disabled. If you don't know what a parameter is, you can always click on the parameter and click for help. The help's actually pretty good throughout iTools. Um, Being that server enable, it's pretty self-explanatory, either it is or not. This is a pretty basic help, but as you can see, if we want it enabled, we turn it on and hit 1. Once we do that, more parameters become available. If we do web security enable, this essentially gives you the option of doing HTTP versus HTTPS. You can do the secure version, but if you don't have a cert stored locally on the versadac, then every time you connect, you'll get those warning messages from the browser indicating that the source is unknown, it's not trusted. You can get through it, but I'm sure you've been to websites where a cert has expired. It's the same kind of concept. For this demo, we're going to go ahead and just leave it as unsecured just to keep it simple. That's pretty much it in terms of the configuration. Note that every versadac out of the box has a web server by default, but it is disabled. So please make sure we go in there and turn that on. Once we do that, the next thing I would suggest doing is clicking on security. And this is your main interface for creating user logins. This applies to a lot of different things. This could be just overall users for configuring your iTools. This is, again, going back to part of a 21 CFR compliant and the whole traceability and providing that audit trail. So we logged on with Engineer a few minutes ago, but ideally you're going to change that password and you're going to create other users and give them specific passwords. So they may be able to do some of this functionality like change set points, acknowledge alarm, but we probably don't want them to go in and make changes to configuration. That's why we have this here. So they log in with one of these names, and then they hit access, and whatever is checked over here is applicable. Now, the name that we're creating really isn't applicable to iTools for this demonstration. It's more for the web server. So keep that in mind. When we want to create a new user, we just simply click Add New User. We'll make this user Bob, and we'll give the password, we'll just make it password. Once we do that, we hit OK. Bob is now created. Notice on the right-hand side here, nothing is checked. And this is important that when we create a user who we want to have access to the web server, we need to give him or her that access to the web server. Since we'll also be going over batch functionality, we probably want to enable batch data entry as well as batch control. And I don't believe I'm going to do this for the demo, but if you wanted to do a demand archive, you'd also set this here. Um, Everything that we do locally here is just local. It's not actually live on the versadac until you hit download. And there's a good reason for that. You don't want to be doing consistent writes to it. Make all your changes you see necessary, and when you're done, go ahead and click download. Download takes maybe about 5 seconds, but it sends all those parameters down, and once it goes through, it comes into effect. Now, a couple quick things I do want to point out. There is a 21 CFR feature on this versadac as well as a security manager feature. If you have the 21 CFR option enabled, you will not have a remove user icon. The reason for this is because 21 CFR indicates that a user name cannot be reused. So if we had the 21 CFR option enabled, we created Bob, and we did not want to use Bob anymore, our only option is to disable or uncheck the enabled Bob. It can never be deleted. So something to kind of keep in mind going forward, that when you create these users, make sure we put some thought into what the username is going to be, and keep in mind that they won't be deleted if you have the 21 CFR option. If you have the security manager option, you can't even use this tool. I will likely go into security manager in another video, but a security manager is a way of creating a central database that ties into your Active Directory, and it manages all the usernames. So without going into more detail from that, if you have any of those two options, this part of the demo will not apply. That being said, I've created my user, I've enabled the web server. Now we should be able to open up any recent web browser and go ahead and get started. So let's go ahead and just open up Chrome. That tends to be one of my more common browser. I can just go ahead and type in the IP address, which I have not changed. It's just 111.222. Go ahead and hit apply, and it will open up the web server. Now, one thing that I did forget to do, I left my device in access. Again, it's not recording right now, but it also means that I have no access to the device. So in order for me to log in, I need to be logged out. And just to kind of prove this, let's go ahead and log in with Bob real quick. It does tell you that it's in config mode. So go ahead and hit X, back to our iTools. Let's go ahead and get out of access mode. And we can go back into our web server. Let's try this again. So now that I've logged out, and now that I have the proper credentials, I am now into the web server. So the first page that you're indicated with is the actual representation of your device. So I have an 8 unit base with 7 of the modules configured. You can click on the first part of it. This is your processor and gives you information about it. If you gave it a specific name, it would be shown here, the firmware version, etc. The other devices do indicate the AI2, AI3, and what kind of modules you have indicated. The little wrench and screwdriver indicate that it can be configured, but that's not a feature that's implemented in the device right now. And if you click on System, this will indicate information about how you have your groups set up. Think of a group as a way of segmenting your data. So the versadac could be a central data acquisition unit, and it could be recording variables from 5 different ovens, for example. You could separate those ovens by groups. That's just one way to look at how do you set up groups. So the green icon indicates that it's active or it is recording something. If it's red, that means that there's no channels associated with the group or it's not recording, etc. Note the name of the group, also by the recording rate. And if there's any messages, which we'll get to, they'll be flashing here. Contact just has some links to our website for various information, troubleshooting, etc. On the left-hand side here, you have group, trending, summary, and instrument. Underneath group, you can have up to 30 groups in the versadac. So if you want to change groups, you simply click on the group name and choose which one you want to look at. I've just switched to group 2. I can go back to group 1. Next, under trending, we can go to bar graph. This is just a standard bar graph screen. You do have some customization available to you. Note that these colors come from the configuration within iTools. It is editable. You can change the colors. I just left the default colors in. However, what you can do is go into options, and you can choose the way a little bit of a customization to how it looks. So, for example, if we want to change it to looking a little more 3D, we don't need 2 decimal places. We do want to keep the grid lines, and we'll just leave it like that. And as you can see, it changes the screen a little bit. This looks amazing on a tablet and phone. So if you can keep in mind that if you have this on the network, the ability to just go up and quickly look at your process is really kind of a neat feature to have. This is your line graph. Same kind of concept applies here. You'll notice that we have a little break in data. That's from me being logged into the device. Making configuration changes. But if you want to change the way that this data looks, for example, maybe we don't want to show all 6 points. We don't want to show the legend, and we want narrow plot thickness. You can change it around a little bit, whatever suits your need. Numerics, same concept. And then historical graph. Now the versadac has onboard data storage, so as you are reading those values into the versadac, it's storing the data locally. It's also gives you the option to take that data and archive it locally to a USB stick, as well as archiving to the review database. But again, this is nice for you to be able to go back and take a look at your process and what happened over the course of the onboard storage. If we have any alarms, they'll be indicated here. It looks like I have set up some alarms, but they have not been triggered yet. So if they do get triggered, you'll see a flashing bell down here as well as information pertaining to the alarm. Messages, as I indicated, it's really just a complete trail of what's happened. So as you can see here, it shows you all the information from configuration changes that I did. This all pertains to the instrument itself. These are system messages, so you can see what time I made changes to the configuration, so on and so forth. Operator notes are pretty interesting. You can have up to 10 static notes. And what is neat about this is if you have a specific function that happens, maybe it's a somewhat regular occurrence, you can put in a custom note within iTools, and you can have that triggered either by clicking this through the web server or by another device. It could be an event input. It could be coming from a PLC. It could be coming from a contact closure. Whatever means is applicable to your application, you can have that trigger. So maybe note 1 is door close, and when the door closes, that contact closure tells the versadac to trigger this message. That's just one example of what you can do. With custom note, however, you can go in and write your own note based on an observance, for example. So if you have somebody coming around and just observing a specific survey or a specific batch being done, you can say survey complete, whatever it may be, and go ahead and hit send. That message then gets printed onto the trend and it becomes part of the historical data. It cannot be altered, cannot be modified or deleted. It is part of the record now. And again, you'd be able to see that information through the review, which prints off all the messages as part of the historical trend. We'll get down to batches next, but demand archive is pretty interesting. So here you give the option of being able to archive locally to a USB stick or to an FTP server, which needs to be configured in iTools. You have the option of choosing what to archive, whether you just do everything or you bring it up to date or specific time interval. If it's active, it will show active here, and last archive indicates when the last time you archived the data. So pretty much this versadac has been running for the past roughly week plus, and storing all the data locally. I can choose to go from USB to FTP, and it's pretty self-explanatory. You just hit start, and depending on how much data is, it can run in the background. Now, with batch, this is neat. This gives you the option to essentially do the batch control from any device you have with web access. Notice that I've set mine up so that it's doing batch per group. So I have my 2 batches here. If I want to start a batch on group 1, I simply click and I put in the information. Now I've set up the versadac so upon starting a batch, batch fields 1 through 3 are cleared. You can choose not to do this. Field 1 will always be cleared because field 1 is a unique identifier. So batch ID should be some kind of counter, some kind of serialization number, and it makes sense for that to be cleared because you really don't want to be using that same identification field for the second batch. But if you're using the same part or maybe it's the same customer, you can choose to leave that in there to save on having to re-enter it. But for this example, I've told the versadac to clear that out every time we run it. If we want to run a batch, it's very, very simple. I've already run one batch, so I'm going to run the second batch. I have mine set up so that it's 5 digits for the serialization number. Part number is going to be 9980, and the customer is going to be Acme customer. Once that's done, we have the option of storing or starting. If we hit store, that puts it into memory. We may want to do this if we're loading a part in, but we're not ready to start the batch and something else is triggering the start. Again, this goes back to my previous comment where it could be a PLC, it could be a contact closure, it could be a number of things. So if you want to do that route, that's why you would use store. For this example, we want to go ahead and just start the batch. Go ahead and hit start. It sends the request, and then if we click on back, you now see a green indication, a green light indicating that the batch has started. It shows you when it started, how long it's been running for, and the first field, which is the unique identifier. This will run until it's indicated to stop. You do have the option of doing a continuous batch or a start-stop batch. We have done a start-stop batch. So the stop can come from another device, or if you'd like to start from the web server, you can click on the group again, go back in and hit stop. Again, the fields are cleared based on my configuration, but you can choose to leave fields 2 all the way up to 10. You can have up to 10 fields in the versadac. You can have those saved as such. If I go back, you'll see that it's changed back to red. It ran for 36 seconds, and really that's pretty much about it. So that makes up the versadac web server. As quickly as I went through that, relatively simplistic, but it gives you a lot of information and a lot of capability for a standard built-in feature. And again, if you need more functionality, utilize an HMI, and keep in mind we still have the review software, which is used for reviewing your historical data. I hope you enjoyed the video. I expect a lot more coming in the next coming weeks. Thanks again.